right, welcome. Good evening, good morning. So I hope you had a good week 1. Welcome to week 2. This week we are discussing Chapter 19, 14th Century Art in Europe. And I look forward to reading all your discussions and journal entries, and I will get feedback to you as soon as possible. So a couple things that I want to address. So first of all, next week, read Chapter 20. So it's really important to read the chapter, the week before. That's kind of a part of the assignment because it will help you understand these lectures better and the other things that I assign. Because again, I can't cover everything in the lectures online. So the slideshows that are posted and the book are really important materials to have. So if you are having troubles getting the book, it should be at the bookstore. Or I also rent mine directly through Pearson. You can rent it for about $10 a month. And I think it's really great. It's very interactive. It has like videos on some of the artworks and techniques. And it really, goes really deep into the subject matter. And again, you can find lots of images in the book, and it has more information than what will be covered in the lectures. So with that being said, too, if you're having a hard time getting the book, please reach out to me and send me a message, and I will, try to help you problem solve that. So, all right. And I think I said that this week also you will find week 2's materials directly under coursework now. There's a folder called coursework. So week 1 was kind of in a folder out there all by itself, but not everything will be kind of tucked neatly in one folder under coursework, like week 2, week 3, week 4, as they kind of pop up. So there's going to be 2 other YouTube's videos posted in there. So one will be a really short video about the fresco technique, which I think you should watch because we'll be looking at frescoes in this chapter and in the future chapters. It's a very, it was a very popular technique. And then the other YouTube video is about 14th century art in Europe, which is directly related to your discussion post. So remember, when you do those discussion posts, your first response is due by Wednesday evening, and then you want to reply to 2 of your classmates by Sunday evening. Okay, so for the journal assignment this week, you will choose one work from Chapter 19, from the slideshows or the book, and write 2 paragraphs. And you'll do an art historian analysis. So remember, there are 4 parts to that. So last week, I really had you do like the first 3. This week, I added in the 4th aspect, or the 4th criterion. So first, you'll talk about the physical properties. So like what you're looking at, it's a sculpture of marble, fresco, is it what type of architecture or church, for example. And then you'll do a formal analysis, so talking about like the imagery, like the line, the color, the shapes, and the composition. And then number 3, you will talk about like the interpretation of it. So perhaps the artist's intent, or also, the subject matter, so what it means. And then number 4, you'll talk about it in its historical context and incorporate vocabulary words from the chapter also. And remember to do the citation. So the discussion question for this week is a YouTube which is posted under Schoology. And I just want to make sure you can see this. So I'm trying to move myself. Okay, so first watch the YouTube video linked in Schoology. It's about 10 or 12 minutes. And then you'll answer the following question in the discussion post. So you'll choose one of the artists and innovation discussed in the video, and then what impact it had on the European style that you find is most significant and why. And so since there are different things to choose from, I think that should open up for a good discussion. All right, so now going into historical context of 14th century Europe. So we have a growing merchant class and civic patronage. So there still is a lot of religious art being made during this time. But also with the growing merchant class, there's a lot more commissions being made to talk about political issues and things happening during that time and how to be a good citizen. There's guild systems and workshop productions, and then we'll also talk about the Black Death and how that kind of reshaped society and devotion. So in 1338, Siena's ruling council, known as the Nine, which was a very wealthy group of merchants and bankers, commissioned Ambrogio Lorenzetti to paint frescoes in the Palazzo Pubblico as a political statement during a period of great prosperity. So this is an example of the starting of growing merchant class and the patronage that they the artists, they were employing artists. So usually to personify, again, like the virtues and morals of governance. All right, and so artists in 14th century Europe were also trained through an apprenticeship system. So not through universities, but as apprentices, and organized into guilds, which regulated equality, provided social services, and participated in religious life. So despite this early economic growth, Europe faced major crises, including famine, the 100 Years' War, the Black Death, and this killed up to 40% of the population. So even so, cultural change continued, especially in Italy, where artists and writers began to focus more on human experience and observation. So writers such as Dante, Petrarch, Chaucer, Christine de Pizan helped establish vernacular literature. So they started choosing like their everyday language, such as English, Italian, French, over Latin. So this created a more human connection between the literature and the art, and then the spectator or the reader. And the new spirit of humanism influenced visual artists like Giotto and Duccio, who emphasized emotional realism and humanity. And so this was starting to lay the foundations for the Renaissance. Okay, so during the 14th century, political power in Europe increasingly shifted away from centralized European control towards independent city-states and strong regional monarchies. In Italy, cities such as Florence, Siena, Venice, and Milan functioned as autonomous states, governed by merchant elites who used art and architecture to express like civil pride and their political legitimacy. So, in contrast, France and England developed stronger centralized monarchies. But noble families and urban centers still held significant influence, especially during the Hundred Years' War. And during this time, royal authority was weakened, and this destabilized regions. So, wealth was generated through trade, and banking allowed urban elites to become powerful patrons of the arts, shaping local artistic styles. And this political fragmentation encouraged also regional identities, resulting in distinct artistic traditions across Europe. Okay, so Florentine painting, Giotto, and naturalism. So he was making more convincing bodies in space, so giving more emphasis to form. And because before this, artwork was, very flat, very two-dimensional. So now you will see as we're looking at the art, there's more of a sense of space being introduced into the art. There's more emphasis on human emotion and narrative clarity. And then he's moving away from this Byzantine stylization. All right, and then Sienese painting is about elegance and spirituality. So this is another type of painting that's really prominent during 14th century art. So it is, I guess, the hallmark or like the, I guess our trademark of this type of painting are the decorative surfaces, the jewel-like colors, elegant lines, and then also, a very more spiritual intensity to them. And there was different goals from the Florentine naturalism. So there's also these luxury devotional books and Book of Hours that became very popular during this time. So by the late 13th century, wealthy patrons began using Book of Hours. So they're private prayer books designed for daily devotional practices at specific hours. So they're very richly and ornately decorated, and they contain prayers, psalms, calendars, and texts honoring like the Virgin and the saints. And by the 14th century, they became very important portable status objects. So a lot of artworks, there's very small paintings done, small sculptures, these small devotional books. People like to have these tiny objects that they could take with them easily. So they became these, yes, very portable status objects. And they were also spiritual tools and very aesthetic. So one of the most famous examples is the Book of Hours by Jean de Avray. So it's a French name. I'm sure I'm going to butcher it. So I butcher some of these names, and I stutter a bit, so just bear with me on that. And so given to the young queen around 1324. So, yes, it was illuminated by Jean Pousselet. So it was given to the queen, and Pousselet's images, they were painted in Cristal. So that's like a technique where you start off with like gray and white, like value scale, and then you paint color over it to give it this jewel-like effect. And this reflected the refined Parisian court style while also showing spatial influences from Sienese art. The book's imagery links Jean's personal prayer to sacred visions, especially scenes from life of the Virgin. So this encouraged to have like emotional identification with religion, and then also a type of meditation, and then hopes for this dynastic continuity. All right, and then also embroidery was very highly prized and exported throughout Europe. Gold and silver threads and skilled needlework was often very, very important. So the court culture of Charles IV had a very strong devotional imagery, and then also architecture and sculpture emphasized spiritual intensity. So by the 14th century, the Holy Roman Empire had become very politically separated, fragmented, with power divided among regional rulers, while emperors focused more on securing their family influence and patronizing local art. So there were still ongoing crises such as famine and war and plague. And this kind of brought or kind of, gave rise to a deeply mystical religious culture in Germany that emphasized both spiritual ecstasy and intense suffering. So I guess you could say it would be like, finding God, or, this elevation through your suffering. So devotional images called Andachtbilder, especially the Vesper build, encouraged worshippers to meditate on Christ's sufferings and Mary's griefs as a path to spiritual understanding. And this could come out of the Black Plague. So people had, gone through a lot of suffering. And so these are things that they understood. So these emotionally charged images reflect a heightened focus on the physical pain, so a connection between physical pain and compassion. So, and this was to make the religious experience more personal and something that could be, supposedly felt. And this emotional intensity is also seen in the Hedwig. Whoops! Oh gosh, what happened? I lost my place. Okay. Can also be seen in the Hedwig Codex, which is, I think, the last image in the chapter. I think it's included too in the slide deck. And this portrays Saint Hedwig as a power devotional figure whose life and imagery continues to combine French Gothic elegance with spiritual seriousness. All right, and then the impact of the Black Death on art. So this obviously gave a heightened sense and awareness of mortality, and this growth of personal devotion, which I addressed in the last slide, especially with these themes of suffering and salvation. So the Black Death was a bubonic plague that reached Europe in the mid-14th century, and it killed a devastating 40% portion of the population, including many artists, and it caused a widespread social breakdown. Because people did not understand the disease, it created fear, confusion, and a lot of religious anxiety. So, art historian Millard Mice argued that this crisis led artists to abandon Giotto's naturalism and return to more rigid symbolic style as people sought spiritual comfort and interpreted the plague as divine punishment. So he used the Strozzi altarpiece as evidence of this. So a lot of altarpieces do express this death, judgment, and redemption, kind of influenced by the trauma of the Black Plague, and then this also influenced on how artists interpreted or portrayed their subject matter. All right, so looking at some art. So in 1330, Andrea Pisano was awarded a prestigious commission for the first pair of gilded bronze doors for the Florence's baptistry of San Giovanni. So the doors were completed within 6 years, and they display 20 scenes from the life of St. John the Baptist. So they are set above 8 personifications of the virtues. And so the overall effect is very flattened and decorative, and a grid of 28 rectangles repeated over and over, and they create this very graceful pattern. And they're in these frames called quatrefoils. And so, however, the figural composition creates the illusion of three-dimensional forms, kind of moving within this moving within this natural and architectural space. Okay, so here is a detail of the Baptist doors. So how space and grouping are working inside this quatrefoil frame. All right, so Chimboy, we'll talk about in Florence. So there was a stylistic change towards the greatest naturalism. So in the first slide, I talked about the Florence style of painting, which was much more natural. So it began earlier than in Siena. So with the work of Chimboy. So I know it's an Italian name. All right. So around 1280, he painted the Virgin and Child enthroned. So this is a monumental altarpiece likely created for Santa Trinita in Florence. So while the composition follows Byzantine traditions, so including the hierarchy scale and Mary gesturing towards Christ as the path to salvation, the artist introduced greater spatial depth, as subtle as it is, and also asymmetry and more individualized facial expressions. So instead of all the faces looking the same as they had been previously painted, he is giving them more individual expressions, like kind of focusing in on each face. So he used gold highlights and very delicate shading to model forms more realistically and to create divine radiance. So this painting represents an important transition from medieval stylization towards naturalism that would shape Florentine art. So including later artists such as Giotto. All right, so here is Giotto, Marriage at Cana, Raising of Laerzus, Lamentation, and Resurrection. So this is a close-up of a fresco, and the focus here is on volume, emotion, spatial coherence, and again it has that very Florentine naturalism. And so you can see the impact that it had on his work. So here is the Raising of Lazarus. So this is tempera and gold on panel. And so you can see the figures are very lyrical. There's a decorative rhythm and a narrative urgency. So you can see that there's really a message in the painting. Okay. And then we're just going to look very quickly through some slides. So here's the Palazzo Pubblico. So we can remember that the nine, the group, they were commissioning a lot of paintings to be done for this building. So this is an example of political pride and civic pride in architecture. And this was commissioned by the nine for the artist Ambrogio Lorenzetti. And it's actually a very, very long panel. So one side is the city, the other side is the country. So the effects of good government in the city and the country. So this is a fresco. And so here, and this is again talking about the morals of being a good citizen. And here's the city side, and then this side is for the people that are living in the country. So it's very focused on propaganda, civic prosperity, and then what the moral outcome will be. Okay. And then the Hedwig Codex. So talking about devotion, dynasty, manuscript art. And then here is the plan of the Church of the Holy Cross of Schwabisch Gmund in Germany. So Charles IV of Bohemia transformed Prague into a major political, cultural, and religious center, earning it the title of New Rome. So we'll go a little bit more into an architectural piece. So educated in France, Charles became the Holy Roman Emperor in 1355 and sponsored ambitious Gothic architecture, including the expansion of St. Vitus Cathedral, where the architect Peter Perrier introduced innovative vaulting and expansive stained glass to create a luminous interior space. So the Perrier family's influence is also seen in the Church of the Holy Cross in Schwabisch Gmund. So it was originally designed by Heinrich Parler and later expanded by Peter. So here's the plan of the church layout. And so you can see that there are 3 aisles, and with a deep chapel, and there's the nave and the choir section. And so these architectural innovations that were being done shaped Central European Gothic style for generations. So even there was some political instability after his death, Charles's death, and so it eventually ended Prague's artistic leadership. And so then here's an interior view. So you can see the vaulting, and then also how this German Gothic architecture creates like this very spatial drama. So just again, the last two slides go over what your discussion prompt is. So actually, you don't have to use the figure numbers. Just talk about the artists or the innovation and what you find most significant and why. And then also, again, you have a journal entry due. All right, and that is it for this week. So yes, I'm trying to keep my videos to about half an hour. So if you have any questions about Chapter 19 or the introduction that you want me to like readdress, you know, I make these videos like week by week, so I can certainly talk about those too in the sequential video. All right, so I hope you have a great week, and yes, thank you for those that reached out with questions just about the course, about assignment details, and I'm happy to answer anything. Remember, no question is like every question is welcome. So there's not, anything such as a dumb question. All right, and I will see you next week.